Hi friends, today we're going to be talking about a term that's been around for a little while, but it's become a little more popular recently. It's called parentification. We're going to dive into that concept and we're going to see what does it mean, where does it come from, what does it look like in our everyday lives and even in the Bible. So let's talk. Hi friends, this is Bethany Jennings and you're listening to We Should Talk. It's a podcast where we talk about anything and everything to encourage, equip, and empower you to be a decent human. Let's talk. Hello friends and welcome back. As previously mentioned, we will be talking about parentification, which is a really fun word to say. We're going to kind of unpack this. We're going to talk about its roots, like where it comes from, like the terminology where it comes from, but also in life where it comes from, how it impacts us, and how we can kind of work towards fixing it, right? Work towards a positive solution. It's really gaining traction. This term's really gaining traction in psychological circles, but also in everyday conversation. And as with any buzzword or trendy term, it can be overused and misused, honestly. I love that people are willing to do introspection, but sometimes our introspection becomes excuses for poor behavior. And it can even become a blame game for someone else in our life. I feel like true knowledge about a topic will prevent inappropriate self-diagnosis and inappropriate blaming of others. Anyways, let's just talk about it. So what is parentification? It's kind of it's one of those things where it's kind of an intersection, as with a lot of things that we talk about on this podcast. It's an intersection of psychology and faith and human interaction. Parentification, it is a psychological term, and it describes a role reversal between a child and their caregiver. A parentified child is burdened with adult responsibilities, whether that be emotional or practical. They are given these responsibilities before they're really developmentally ready to handle them. There is a psychologist named Bozor Minginaj. Bozor Minginaj is his name. He is a Hungarian-born man who really helped found or build the foundation of contextual family therapy. He's actually kind of an interesting character because he was born in 1920, and so we have like video of him and interviews and that kind of stuff. So it's kind of nice to be able to like see him at work. There's all kinds of YouTube videos of him. It's kind of cool to be able to see him at work, but he was really foundational in contextual family therapy. He has a book called Invisible Loyalties about how different childhood circumstances and relationships affect our loyalties and how it visibly shows up in our adulthood. Anyways, I really want to dig into that this year, but at some point this year, but that's not what this podcast is about. That's not what this episode's about. So anyways, Bozor Minginaj is his name. He and a colleague, a peer, whose last name was Spark, they coined this term parentification in the 1970s as part of their work on family systems therapy. And they break it up into two different kinds of parentification. There's instrumental parentification, where the child takes on physical or logistical responsibilities, such as cooking meals or making sure the bills are paid or caring for younger siblings or whatever. So it's like practical application things that the parent should be doing or caregivers should be doing, but they're not. They're putting that responsibility on their child. So there's instrumental parentification, but there's also emotional parentification, which is when the child becomes an emotional support system for a parent and starts acting as a confidant or a counselor. I think more often we will see the emotional parentification, even if we don't realize that's what we're seeing. We see emotional parentification before we see instrumental parentification. I think instrumental parentification, I think sometimes we see that and immediately note, oh, that's not appropriate, and that child shouldn't have to watch his siblings, and that child shouldn't have to cook the meal, and they should have to make sure the bills are paid, and they shouldn't have to make sure their sibling has a place to sleep. We see that, we think, oh, that's not right. That's abuse. But we don't even recognize the emotional parentification sometimes. We'll talk about it here in a little bit. Research in peer-reviewed journals like Family Process and Journal of Family Psychology, they actually highlight that there are long-term effects of parentification. And some of those long-term effects are what you may expect, is anxiety. Because as a child, you're constantly worrying about things that you shouldn't have to. So anxiety, depression, difficulty forming healthy relationships in adulthood because you're just used to being a parent. Excuse me, I have to get a drink of coffee. I feel like have to is a strong term, but whatever, I got it. So in recent years, it's been around for a little bit, but this term has gotten more popular. So in recent years, discussions on mental health, childhood trauma, especially on social media platforms, have really amplified awareness of parentification and what all it entails. And there's even more literature on it now. Books like Lindsay C. Gibson wrote a book called Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents. That kind of literature specifically writing towards this term and this situation have really contributed to growing prominence, growing awareness of this term. It's been around since the 70s, like 1970s, but it's gotten more and more popular. That's what I was saying at the beginning of the episode. Like, because it's on social media, a lot of times people are like, oh, I recognize it here, and I see it here, and I see it here. And it's okay to be aware of things, but you need to understand what it is before you just start labeling situations with it. So we're thankful for literature on it, but you need to know the literature before you go, diagnose with folks. I mentioned earlier that there are long-term consequences that, are really highlighted in some of the peer-reviewed journals, like Family Psychology, Family Process, that kind of stuff. But the consequences of parentification really are long-term. And you'll see them in adults if you just sit back, shut up, and watch, which is my favorite thing to do, actually. Is sit back, shut up, and watch. Usually, parentified children often grow into adults that have difficulty setting boundaries. Like they're so accustomed to prioritizing others over themselves that they don't set appropriate boundaries and they don't take care of themselves. And when it comes time for healing, sometimes they go the opposite direction of extreme of, no, I'm not helping anybody and I'm only going to take care of myself and, which also isn't healthy. I think I have an episode on boundaries already. If you haven't listened to the episode on boundaries, go listen to it. But just to highlight, boundaries are not for the other person. The boundaries are for you. Boundaries are protecting you. When you see a wildlife preserve and there's these giant gates on the far outskirts of it, that's not to protect the animals trying to get in. That's to protect the animals that are already within the boundary. The boundaries are for you. So when someone does this, I will. That should be your template for your boundary. Anyways, go listen to the episode if you haven't heard it yet. I'm pretty sure I got an episode on it. If not, I'll write one. Anyways, they have problems setting those boundaries. Difficulty saying, no, I'm going to do this when you violate a boundary. Because they have people-pleasing tendencies, which is another very serious consequence. So often we see adults whose validation is sought through overachievement or over-the-top service. And it's because they had to be the parent so early on. They had to be the adult so early on. And so they need people to affirm them. They need people to approve of them. They go above and beyond at the expense of their own well-being to overachieve and to take care of other people and serve other people. Another one we see, again, because of constant caregiving, is emotional burnout. They don't take time out to just sit with their thoughts, probably because it's too scary for them. Most of the time when you see someone who doesn't want to slow down, it's because when they slow down, the quiet's too loud. It's emotional burnout. And when you have emotional burnout, again, I think I have an episode on this. I do have an episode, a burnout episode, but I'm going to do another one, like a deep dive into it. So stay tuned for that. Anyways, the emotional burnout, it comes from the constant caregiving. And so it leaves little room for self-care, self-reflection, self-healing, right? You want to take care of other people. And a lot of times on a spiritual aspect, these people may not want to spend a whole lot of time in prayer, because prayer exposes things. If you're doing it right, prayer exposes things that the Lord wants you to work on, and you may not want to work on it. And self-care is prayer, period. You'll also see, as a consequence of parentification, challenges in romantic relationships. So they may get in a relationship and then they take on the caretaker role. And so they're trying to mom their spouse or dad their spouse, and that's not what you're supposed to do as a spouse. And then you struggle with intimacy, and then there's fear of abandonment, and there's lots of lots of issues associated with parentification. Matter of fact, I just read a thing about parentification in relationships, adult romantic relationships, and I think I'll do like a completely separate episode on that, because I want to like get into it and list it out for you guys. But anyways, so there are long-term consequences, is the whole point of what I'm saying, to parentification. And there's even one study in the Journal of Family Therapy that found adults who experienced emotional parentification often struggle with codependency and have an increased likelihood of choosing emotionally unavailable partners. They feel the need, like it's normal for them to constantly pull for attention and pull for affirmation, and so they think that's normal, and that's what they lean towards. And the codependency, they're so dependent on them to their own detriment. So all of these things are real. And this isn't just things that we see today. This has been going on since biblical times, people. Literally. And we can talk about some examples of that. So we see that there's an issue. We see what causes it. We see the consequences of it. So how can we take steps towards preventing it? And if it's already happened, how can we take steps towards healing and redeeming some of that? So for adults who were parentified, like you're an adult now, but as a child, you also had to be an adult, set those boundaries. Learn to set boundaries. Practice saying no without feeling guilty. I struggle with this, not because I was parentified, but I struggle with this because I think sometimes in our Christian culture, we're taught that to say no is to deny sacrifice. And that's not always the case. Not at all. Even Jesus said no to some folks. And that's all right. So learn to set those boundaries. Again, go listen to that episode. Boundaries are for you, not for them. It's actions you take when they disrespect a boundary. And in that boundary, develop some self-compassion. Acknowledge that it wasn't your fault you had to be an adult. It wasn't your fault that you missed part of your childhood. None of that was your fault. You did what you needed to do to survive, and or help your siblings survive, and or help your parents survive. It's not your fault, and you're not a bad person for having done it. Your parents may not even be bad people for may not even realize what they were doing. Don't hold a grudge. Grudges hurt the holder. And in doing that, in setting those boundaries and in developing self-compassion, then you learn to receive. Allow others to help you and support you and care for you. Be it a friend, be it a family member, be it a pastor. A lot of times we see people who have issues with their parental relationships have major issues with pastoral relationships because they're not accustomed to being cared for, or they are too accustomed to being abused, and they just assume any authority figure is out to hurt them and abuse them. So learn to receive. Learn to receive help from your spouse, even from your significant other. Learn to receive help from them and realize it doesn't make you lesser than. It doesn't make you weak. It just makes you human. And it's okay to be a human. If you need help doing all these things, it's okay to get therapy. The best talk therapy there is prayer. Prayer is the best talk therapy there is, because the Lord will lead you in your everyday decisions. And you may not even realize it, but when you pray daily and you are in alignment with Christ and you are following what he says and you truly know him, then it's easy to choose what he would choose. Oh, I know what the Lord would do here. Because you know him. You spent time with him, talking to him and hearing from him through prayer and through reading his words that he gave you. Now, if you are a parent, so that's for adults who were parentified. If you are a parent who has children and you are concerned that you may be doing this to your child, or you may just want to make sure that you don't do this to your child, here's some tips. Be very mindful of your words and actions. This is for the emotional parentification portion. Avoid oversharing adult concerns with your children. Do not say, I'm stressed about getting groceries. Do not say, oh, we can't get you those shoes because we're not going to make the light bill. They don't need to know all that. They don't need to know all that. That's too much on them. Just I'm sorry, honey, not this time. And they may want to throw a fit and they may not understand. That's fine. Do not put that emotional load on them. And then them in turn feel guilty. I wanted new shoes and now I'm taking from our family and I'm so selfish and don't do that to them. That's not right. I think sometimes we do this, especially in ministry homes, because when we sit down to a meal or we sit down to even just in our living room, our conversations are constantly centered around the church and what's going on in the church and how we can help people and what we can do for them. And there may be kids from the family overhearing heavy conversations. Not that you're talking ugly about people. They're saying, Sister so-and-so is really struggling with ABC. We need to see if we can swoop in and help her, see if we can set up and it's okay for them to understand that we help people. But the heaviness of some of our conversations, I think as ministry parents, we need to be very, very aware of what we're saying in front of our kids and very, very aware that we use uplifting words and uplifting terms and speak positively about the church, because we are forming their psyche about the church. If every church conversation is problem solving, that doesn't make the church a peaceful place for them. They can understand the reality at an appropriate age that the church is full of people who have problems and therefore we try to help them. But they need to understand the church as a haven. They need to understand the church as a place where people can get help, but they don't need to have the heaviness of those conversations. The dinner table should not be a problem-solving session every night. It's just that shouldn't be the core of your conversation. As far as instrumental parentification, you don't have to do everything for your kid. That's also damaging. As scripture says, moderation in all things. You can foster age-appropriate independence in your child. Let your kids contribute without overwhelming them, right? So Onyx helps me load the dishwasher. He puts the laundry in the washer. He thinks everything's a dryer. He calls it all a dryer. And we were on a trip. I said, I'm going to have to take care of these clothes. He goes, yeah, Mom, you have to put them in our dryer. I said, yes, but our washer first. And it may take him 10 minutes to get one load in because he does it one towel at a time. That's fine. It keeps him busy for 10 minutes while I do something else. So he's 3 years old, but he can pick up a towel and put it in the washer. And he feels like he's contributing. And I think it's wonderful. He is contributing. I think it's wonderful. But it's age appropriate. I'm not saying, hello, my 3-year-old. Please cook a meal. Do meal planning. Go to the grocery store. Vacuum and mop the floors. I'm not asking him to do all that. I say take your shoes to your room. Sometimes they make it in the shoe bin. Sometimes they just make it in the door. But it's age appropriate, right? So let them contribute, because you want to be able to raise independent, successful adults. But you don't want to raise codependent adults. Foster that independence and give them age appropriate things to do. Also, as a parent, if it's not that you it doesn't matter how heavy my load is, I have to do it all myself. No, you don't. That's not healthy. You need to build a support network or find a support network. That's one of the advantages of having a church family, is that it's like a ready-made community. If the church is doing its job, you can seek help from other adults instead of relying solely on your child and or children to get through life. I know that there are a lot of single parents in the church now just because of how life is. But you don't have to do it all yourself. You can build a network of moms. You can build a network of caregivers, of whatever, that can help you. That way you're not relying solely on your child to do things, right? So I have this work meeting. I'm not going to make my 10-year-old watch my 4-year-old. No, I'm going to bring in a trusted emphasis on trusted individual to take care of my kids while I go to the meeting. Again, trusted, wisdom, that's a different conversation. So yeah, we do see this though in everyday life. So it may be conversations. It may be you expecting your child to do too much at an early age. I have had sessions with people young children actually, who were having a difficult time adjusting to their new caregivers because they were the ones that took care of their younger sibling. And so they didn't understand why this new adult was trying to tell them when to go to bed. And the person told me, well, why do they get to tell me when to go to bed? I'm always the one that takes care of us. They don't have to take care of us. I take care of us. I make sure we have a place to sleep when mom throws up on the bed after she's drunk. I make sure. Yeah. And so imagine the issues that will come of that if it's not addressed now. But it's not just modern issues, right? Parentification is not just a modern issue. It also appears in the Bible. One possible example to consider is Joseph in Genesis. As a teenager, Joseph is favored by his father, and he said, go check on your brothers and go do this and go do that. But he also bore the brunt of his family's dysfunction because they were going to kill him. He's like, nah, I'll put him in a well. Nah, let's sell him into slavery. Let's get something out of it. And so he is a teenager sold into slavery, and then he rises to prominence in Egypt, and then he's sent to prison because whatever his name was, his wife was a stupid head dummy butt. And then he gets out of there, and then he's second in command, right? And he takes on this enormous responsibility of managing resources during a famine. That is a heavy burden. Heavy burden. Another example, Moses' sister Miriam. She watched over her baby brother in the Nile. She played a very critical role in ensuring his safety. And this story does reflect a very young child assuming responsibilities typically meant for an adult, right? And what do we see later in her life? She has an issue letting Moses lead. Remember the whole leprosy scene, that whole thing? The scripture tells us in Proverbs 22, it says, train up a child in the way he should go. When he's old, he will not depart from it. That's not just talking about doctrine. You may think it is, but I try to see it not just as doctrine, but training up a child, like how to function in this world, how to function as a Christian in a non-Christian society. It reminds us that kids need guidance. You can't just throw them to the wolves and expect them to not become one. They need guidance that is appropriate for their stage of development. Even Jesus, not only did he rest, he invites us to rest. He speaks about burdens that we sometimes wrongly place on ourselves if we have been parentified. Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. That's the spiritual aspect of the psychology. That's that prayer talk therapy I was talking about. Jesus' counselor. If you see yourself in these patterns, just remember God is always in the business of redemption. He can turn the most difficult circumstances into opportunities for healing and growth. Parentified adults, take heart in Joseph's story. Despite his burdens, God used his struggles to prepare him for leadership and restoration with his family. In the same way, your experiences can become a source of strength and resilience and even compassion for others and yourself. I do not deny that parentification can leave very deep scars, but healing is possible. Throughout this episode, if you have recognized yourself or someone you love throughout this podcast and this conversation we're having, then use it as a prompt to take steps towards understanding and grace and growth. And remember, you don't have to carry it all by yourself. You don't have to carry these burdens alone. Awareness is the first step, but there are more steps to be taken. And in all things, pray, pray, pray. And Jesus is going to lead you the way you should go. It's been kind of a long episode, but until next time on We Should Talk, be kind to yourself take the next small step towards being a better human. Love y'all. Well, that was fun. I'm glad you stuck around for the whole thing. And thank you for talking to me today. Y'all go like and follow and review and do all the podcast things that people do. And don't forget to be a good human.